Hi, this is Mr. Johns. What is an ecosystem? This information came from Kahnacademy's website. As you can see at the bottom, it says Kahnacademy. It gives you exactly where that website is that I found. And I'm using this for my students in 7th grade science. What this text is about is there's about a video ahead of this or before this one that explained a lot of this, and this is just the key words behind it. So the key points in this text that we're going to read are: an ecosystem consists of a community of organisms together with their physical environment. So an ecosystem has a community of organisms together with their physical environment. So it means abiotic and biotic. Ecosystems can be of different sizes and can be marine, aquatic, or terrestrial. Terrestrial means land-based. So broad categories of terrestrial ecosystems are called biomes. And these are, again, we'll talk about these later. In ecosystems, both matter and energy are conserved. That means neither destroyed or they're not generated or destroyed. Energy flows through the system, usually from light to heat, while matter is recycled. And ecosystems with higher diversity tend to be more stable with greater resistance and resilience in the face of disturbances and disruptive events. So we're going to talk about each one of these 4 areas in more detail. Let's first start out with the ecosystem. And we're going to start out with what do the tide pools in the California coast and the Amazon rainforest of South America have in common? Despite being many orders of magnitude different in size, so they're both very different in size. You can see the one that's down here on the left where the sea stars are. Whoops. Let's go back to our sea stars. So here where the sea stars are, this is a very small area. It might be, I don't know, it could be as small as 1 foot by 1 foot or 12 inches by 12 inches. It could be 3 feet by 3 feet. I'm not exactly sure, but it's not very big. Versus the Amazon rainforest here is definitely several acres, so several square acres. And it could be hundreds. I'm not sure how big this picture is. Several square acres. I'm not sure how big that is. But one is small and one is large, and that could all be an ecosystem that we're going to study. So as a reminder, a community consists of all the populations of all the species that live together in a particular area. The concepts of ecosystem and community are closely related. The difference is that an ecosystem includes the physical environment while a community does not. In other words, a community is the biotic or living components of an ecosystem. In addition to this biotic component, the ecosystem also includes an abiotic component to the physical environment. Ecosystems can be small, such as the tide pools found near the rocky shores of many oceans, or very large, such as the Amazon rainforest in South America. It's basically up to the ecologists studying the ecosystem to define its boundaries in a way that makes sense for their questions of interest. So let's go back up here to community, and I want to start with the part of the community that is the biotic components of the ecosystem, or the biotic components of the ecosystem. So community, let's see if we can put it in here. Community equals all living elements in an area. A population equals only one species. So I may ask, what's the population of salmon in the river? What's the population of the German browns in the river? What's the population of the finches in that area? What's the population of the seagulls or the pigeons in that area. So that would be the population. A community would be how many fish are in that water, or how many living creatures are in that water or on that land. And as far as the ecosystem, again, it depends on the ecologist that wants to make this study. I liked how on Kahnacademy's video, he talks about it could be the study of a person, and we could talk about the whole person, or we could just talk about, and I'm going to do a famous drawing here with my hand. It could be just this hand, this small section right here. It could be this small section right here. Or it could be even a smaller section of my hand and talk about what's going on in the smaller section of my hand. So it could be very large, or it could be very small for an ecosystem. So what are ecosystems like? The short answer, they're incredibly diverse. Not only can ecosystems vary in size, but they can also differ in just about every imaginable biotic or abiotic feature. Some ecosystems are marine. Marine, remember what marine means? Marine means the salt water. Anything that's not fresh water, so oceans. Others freshwater, and others yet terrestrial, which are land-based. Ocean ecosystems are most common on Earth, as oceans and the living organisms they contain over 75% of the Earth's surface. Freshwater ecosystems are the rarest, covering only 1.8% of the Earth's surface. The terrestrial land ecosystems cover the remainder of the Earth. So what's that mean? Well, that means I have 75% ocean. Let's see if I can spell ocean yet. So ocean, let me erase that. So 75% is ocean. I have 1.8% fresh water. So it gives me 76.8%. So that means I have remaining 23.2% is going to be land. And that's going to equal my 100% of Earth. So terrestrial ecosystems can be further grouped into broad categories called biomes. Biomes are based largely on climate. Examples of terrestrial biomes include tropical rainforests, savannas, deserts, coniferous forests, deciduous forests, and tundra. The map below shows the broad distribution of biomes on Earth. The one thing I want to point out that you can look at is you can see that you have one part which is the boreal forest. And if you follow it across, if you look at the latitude, and I'm not drawing a straight line, I understand that, but they kind of go along with where the other ones are. So if you look at the top of this one, and you go across continents, and again, you can't look at my lines because they're really crooked, but it goes across and it has the same latitude. We have the deserts down here, and I'm making this line so it looks like it's right, but it goes right across that point. And again, at here, we're going to go across this point. So you can see the different biomes are within the same latitude of the Earth. Remember, latitude is like a ladder, and it just goes up until we get to the equator, which is right around, if I get it correct, somewhere around here should be about our equator. So that should be 0. Even with a biome, there can be great diversity. For example, both the Sonoran Desert on the left and the interior of the island of Boa Vista, which is somewhere close to Africa, the Sonoran Desert is like Arizona, can be classified as desert, but they have very different ecological communities. Many more species of plants and animals live in the Sonoran Desert. And as you can see with the Sonoran Desert, there's lots of plants that enable things to live better, easier. So we can have rabbits, we can have lots of things that have cover so that they're hidden so that other birds and predators can't attack them. Where here, you'd be very difficult to find larger animals like rabbits out here because there's no place for them to hide. And this is very hot. Those rocks are very hot. And they also get very cold at nighttime, much more than this picture. Ecosystem, energy and matter in the ecosystems. Energy and matter in the ecosystems. Ecosystem ecologists are often most interested in tracing the movement of energy and matter through an ecosystem. We'll take a closer look at the movement of energy and matter when we consider food webs, networks of organisms that feed on one another. We've talked about food webs. Excuse me. So let's go back to food webs. Networks of organisms that feed on one another, and biogeochemical cycles, the pathways taken by chemical elements as they move through the biosphere. The organisms found in an ecosystem tend to have adaptations, beneficial features arising by natural selection that help them get energy and matter in the context of that particular ecosystem. Before we get into the details, though, it looks at the key features of how energy and matter travel through the ecosystem. Both energy and matter are conserved, meaning they're neither created nor destroyed. So energy and matter is neither created nor destroyed, but take different routes through the ecosystem. Matter is recycled, so that means we go through a system that it just constantly recycles. It never leaves Earth. Energy flows through the ecosystem, usually entering as light, so that's usually the sun, and exiting as heat, so some type of heat it exits. Matter is recycled. Matter is recycled through Earth's ecosystem. Though it may move from one ecosystem to another, as it does when nutrients are washed away into a river, the same atoms are used over and over again, assembled into different chemical forms and incorporated into the bodies of different organisms. So the atoms never leave, they just get recycled. As an example, let's see how chemical nutrients move through a terrestrial ecosystem. A land plant takes on carbon dioxide. So a land plant, we'll talk about this tree in this case, takes on carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide goes in. Okay, so land plant takes on carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and other nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil. So nitrogen and phosphorus, which are not listed here, they are down in the soil. So nitrogen and phosphorus, these are big things in the soil. Okay, so let's go back up here to nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil to build the molecules that make up the cells. When animals eat the plants, it uses the plant's molecules for energy and is building material for its own cells, often rearranging atoms and molecules into new forms. And so we've already talked about how we have water plus CO2 equals the sugar that we were able to get to use to eat plus the O2s. Now, what's that photosynthesis? So when plants and animals carry out cellular respiration, remember cellular respiration is what we do. When we eat food, we release energy. And we also exhale CO2. So when plants and animals carry out cellular respiration, it breaks down molecules as fuel, because that's how we get our energy. Carbon dioxide is released, that's what we exhale. So carbon dioxide is exhaled and released into the atmosphere. Similarly, when they excrete waste or die, their chemical compounds are used for energy and building materials by bacteria and fungi. These decomposers release simple molecules back into the soil and atmosphere where they can be taken up anew in the next round of cycle. So we're talking about not just things. We're talking about when a tree dies, its waste or its cells are going to get recycled back into the soil. When we talk about, even if it's just the waste from an animal, when we have waste from the animal, the waste from the animal also gets recycled using decomposers, and the decomposers are able to get the simple organic molecules back into the soil. So again, we'll go back over here where it says, thanks to this recycling, the atoms that make up your body right now have long, unique histories. They've most likely been parts of plants, animals, and other people, and even dinosaurs. So this part here, just skip this part. This is nothing. So we even have parts of atoms that we believe are also parts of dinosaurs at one point in time, because atoms have never been created, and they're not, well, they've been created, but they haven't been destroyed. Energy flow is unidirectional or one way. And I do want to take back that part where I said atoms are being created. I meant that in a different direction, but they are not necessarily created. Okay, let's go back. Energy flow is unidirectional or one way. So unidirectional one way just means it goes, that's not where I wanted to put my line. It just goes one direction. So it's not going to be cycled where we make something, we use it, and it gets back into decomposers, and we end up reusing it again. That's not what's going to happen with energy. Energy flows. So we have sun. Let me go ahead and read this. So cannot be recycled in the ecosystem. Instead, energy flows through an ecosystem. It's one-way street and generally from light to heat. So here's our sun. The sun moves down to the tree. The tree is going to use that energy and it's going to create heat. The same thing with an animal, the same thing with us. We have a temperature of 96.8 degrees. Did I do that right? We have a temperature that we create, so we're always warm. And that's the same with every plant and animal. We have heat. Energy usually enters the ecosystem with sunlight and is captured in chemical form by photosynthesizers like plants and algae. The energy is then passed through the ecosystem, changing forms as organisms metabolize, produce waste, eat one another, and eventually die and decompose. Each time energy changes form, some of it is converted to heat. Heat still counts as energy, and thus no energy has been destroyed. But it generally can't be used as energy source by living organisms. Ultimately, energy that entered the ecosystem with sunlight is dissipated as heat and radiated back into space. So everything is not just within the earth, it's also within the universe. And so again, you can look at the picture. Please stop the video if you want to look at the picture and study the picture more about how we have the sun, the energy. The rabbits eat the grass. That's part of where we get the energy from the sun. It uses that energy. The fox eats the rabbit. Other things eat the fox. The crow or the snake, they eat fox. Whatever it is, everything gets recycled. We use the energy inside as much as we can, and if not, it's released as heat. The one flow of energy through ecosystem means that every ecosystem needs a constant supply of energy, usually from the sun, in order to function. Energy can be passed between organisms, but it cannot be recycled because some of it's lost as heat in each transfer. Okay, stability and dynamics of ecosystems. Ecosystems are dynamic systems, and a static ecosystem would be a dead ecosystem. So dynamic means it's constantly moving. Just as a static cell would be a dead cell, as we discussed above, energy is constantly flowing through an ecosystem, and chemical nutrients are continually being recycled. At higher levels of organization, organisms are dying and being born. Populations are fluctuating in their numbers, and climate patterns are varying seasonally in less predictable ways. Equilibrium and disturbance. Equilibrium is a steady of state of an ecosystem, in which is a steady of state of ecosystem. Equilibrium is a steady state of Okay, that's a little different for me. Equilibrium is the steady state of an ecosystem, so the constant stability of an ecosystem, in which its composition identity remain generally constant despite fluctuations in physical conditions and makeup of the biotic community. Ecosystems may be knocked out of equilibrium by disturbances, disruptive events that affect their composition. This is what I love about Earth. Earth always moves towards equilibrium. So if we have some type of disturbance, so again in this case, we have a fire, and this fire burns, but after a while, after time, so we'll call this time, after time goes by, pretty soon these things grow back to what they were before, and we create equilibrium in the world again. At first we're losing, when we have the fire, what happens? Now we lose a place for the plants to create more oxygen. We create a problem for landslides. But eventually, it'll all come back to equilibrium. We'll get the plants, we end up getting the trees after the trees are burned. And it actually turns out to be a much more healthy forest, or a much more healthy land area, grass area. Some disturbance are results of natural process. For example, fire is a disturbance that can be caused by lightning in a prairie or forest ecosystem. Other disturbances are the results of human activities. Examples include acid rainfall, deforestation, algal blooms, and the introduction of invasive species. Different ecosystems may respond differently to the same disturbances. One may recover rapidly, another may recover more slowly, or not at all. Ecologists sometimes use two parameters to discuss how an ecosystem responds to the disturbance. These parameters are resistance and resilience. The ability of an ecosystem to remain at equilibrium in spite of disturbance is called resistance. How readily an ecosystem returns to equilibrium after being disturbed is called resilience. Some ecologists consider resistance to be an element of resilience. One acts on the short time scale. So resilience and resistance. Resistance resistance is equilibrium to the resilience. So resistance, okay, how fast? So the ability of an ecosystem to remain at equilibrium despite of disturbances. So if I have a fire, did the ecosystem stay in place? Did I have landslides because of the lack of vegetation? And how readily can an ecosystem return back to equilibrium is also called resilience. So if I have a bunch of trees that are burned down in the sequoias or in Yosemite, how fast can they return back? And that's called resilience. Many ecologists think that the biodiversity of an ecosystem plays a key role in stability. For example, if there were just one plant species with a particular role in an ecosystem, a disturbance that harms one species, say a drought for a drought-sensitive species, might have a severe impact on the ecosystem as a whole. In contrast, if there were several plant species with similar functional roles, there would be a better chance of one of them being drought-tolerant and helping the ecosystem as a whole survive the drought period. And if you remember anything about DNA, it goes along with people and survival. So it's the same thing with plants. The more diversity, the better chance things can live. Ecosystem resistance and resilience are important when we consider the effects of disturbances caused by human activities. If a disturbance is severe enough, it may change an ecosystem beyond the point of recovery. Push the ecosystem to a zone where it is no longer resilient. A disturbance of this sort could lead to a permanent alteration of loss of ecosystem. And we're really talking about this in the glacier area. In the glacier area, we don't know what's going to happen once all these glaciers are melted. Are they going to be able to get back to glacial points? We don't know. And so this is a permanent alteration of loss of the ecosystem in the glacial area. So we talk about the polar bears, we talk about the different animals that are up in that area. And this is the end of this reading.